no doubt aware, there's been quite a lot of activity in the energy sort of policy here in sort of discussion about between parties, particularly since the opposition leader announced his policy on freezing energy prices. I wondered, what is Ofgem's response to Ed Miliband's suggestion of price freezing?
Well, at the first level, I'm going to sort of repeat what I said before, that it is the public policy framework under which we operate, or under which another regulator operates, is for the government of the day to determine. And it is absolutely right that these big issues are being debated in the by politicians, and absolutely right that these options should be considered. We will work with whatever government to make sure that the policies that they have operate in the interests of customers. And we have obviously yet to see any detail of what the Labour Party proposes. We'd be happy to work through that to make sure it's practical. And the sort of things we would consider is, does it have an adverse impact on consumers? And that includes, does it have an adverse impact on the investment that's needed?
Sure, but you have over 25 years, I gather, of experience in the energy utility market. You must have an opinion on the merits of price fixing. I mean, as you might not be surprised to hear, price fixing just displaces price increases.
Well,
so what's your opinion?
I've talked already about price regulation as opposed to allowing markets to look at it, and price regulation clearly is an option, but it is obviously necessary to allow companies to recover the revenues that they need to be able to run their businesses effectively. They should have no guarantee of profits or no guarantee of cost recovery, but an efficient business serving customers well should be able to recover the costs that they incur. Clearly, so clearly any arrangement that doesn't allow them to do that potentially puts at risk investment in the industry, puts at risk the proper functioning of the industry, and potentially becomes a windfall tax rather than necessarily a price regulation mechanism. And once again, although if that is the route a government wants to go down, then that's for governments to decide. But we clearly think it's important that there is a stable regulatory framework under which consumers and investors can make effective decisions in a marketplace.
Okay, so what you're saying is that they're going to need to retain the same income, so therefore for 20 months they won't, and for the preceding period and for the period afterwards they'll adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, there are two debates going on here, and one, I guess, is whether or not we or anyone else should have the ability to regulate the end prices of customers. I think the other debate is whether or not there have been windfall profits, which effectively need to be clawed back from the companies. So those are two separate debates, and those are debates for politicians and not ones for us. But clearly we are concerned about maintaining investor confidence and indeed the confidence of consumers in this market.
So that leads neatly into, former Prime Minister John Major sort of waded into it and suggested a windfall tax. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I will have an opinion at a very high level, recognising I think there's a couple of things. First of all, a windfall tax needs a windfall. I think that's the first thing you need to establish, and secondly, you need to be very careful not to undermine the let's say the regulatory contract that we've worked hard to establish, whether it's on networks, on generation, which means that efficient companies doing well, delivering benefits for consumers, potentially profit from that. And I think anything that potentially undermines confidence in the market potentially is detrimental to consumers. So I think when considering such policies, you need to be very careful about those consequences. So I think that's true of politicians from any party, and a general point, I think.
Right. So you've got a monopoly provider, National Grid, and you have 6 companies that hardly have changed their proportion of electricity and gas in the market. They're pretty sort of stable. Static is probably a better word in terms of the proportion of electricity and gas that each company delivers. So the definition of the word sort of windfall, and indeed fair, and proportionate and all those sort of things have to be, those definitions are in the context of the fact that these are essentially companies that have pretty guaranteed market shares, and a company like National Grid, which has 100% monopoly, virtually, market share. So the definition of a windfall in those sort of contexts is very difficult to make.
It's not difficult to make in the terms of the regulated networks. We regulate those companies. We set their prices. We don't give these companies windfalls. If they earn above their allowed cost of capital equity return, it's because they've delivered additional benefits for consumers, either by reducing prices or delivering more outputs or improving service. And I would not call that a windfall. I call that a proper incentive for these customers.
I detect that you think price fixing and windfall taxes and everything else is, you're not overly enthusiastic. Is that because you think the current system in play delivers a good return for the customer and for the taxpayer?
No, if we thought that the competition in the retail market, the level of competition in the retail market was acceptable, we wouldn't be making the dramatic changes to the retail market that we're making, and we wouldn't be doing the competition assessment with the OFT and the CMA. We have said, for the last 5 years that there needs to be action to improve competition in the retail market, and indeed action to improve access to wholesale market liquidity as well. And these are things we have been taking action on. So, that there is a long way from saying that market isn't working effectively as it should be, from saying that there is a large windfall here. And I think that that would need to be established before you even start thinking about it.
And specifically with windfall taxes, your answer earlier with regards to sort of transparency of trading was, to my mind, somewhat opaque. It was like you didn't really know everything about the trades, and indeed if you knew about the positions that each company were taking, you could have anticipated where we are now in terms of discussing price rises. So it gave me the impression that you didn't really know about all of the trades and positions that companies are taking with regards to the wholesale market. Was that a fair...
Yeah, it's fair to say that we don't know every individual trade that the company
building
makes,
on that,
and that's absolutely fair.
Okay, so building on that...
But neither would you expect us to do that in the context of a competitive market.
Right, okay, but building on that, is it not possible that if a government of the day announced that they were going to apply a windfall tax, that these vertically integrated companies would then therefore move all of their profits, shall we say, northward into their sort of supply and trading arms, and leave virtually an operating loss, which incidentally I think EDF did 1 year, had an operating loss on its retail arms, so therefore there's no windfall tax because there's no windfall, because there's no profits. Is that possible?
Well,
is it possible?
If you forgive me, I'm not going to start speculating about how companies might react to a policy that might be
I'm
put
not
in
on about
place
speculating.
by a
Is
current
it
or future government.
Is it possible that they could do that?
We do not control how the companies organise and arrange their affairs.
I'm not saying you do. I'm asking you whether you think it is possible for them to move their profits into a position, part of their company, in their structure, so therefore no windfall tax would be... Because if you were trying to tax profits, which is essentially what John Major's suggesting, is it possible for them to move their...
It wouldn't be possible for them to do it easily.
But it is possible.
Through our segmental statements. I can't say absolutely because
So it's possible.
No, I can't. You're asking me to give an absolute assurance about something that I can't give an absolute assurance about, because you're talking about how companies themselves.
Ofgem regulates the market,
affairs.
sir. Yeah, is
no,
that right?
We supervise the market.
Okay. You supervise the market, yet you're not able to tell me whether they were able to move their profits around.
No, we put in place the corporate segmental statements to give a clear picture of where the companies are making their profits between the retail business and the wholesale business. As I have said, there is no evidence that the companies are doing anything untoward.
I'm not suggesting there is, I'm asking a question.
And we put in place a lot of checks and balances to make sure that the evidence that they're providing provides an accurate picture. But can I give you an absolute guarantee that the companies can't find a way around that? No more than, I suppose if you had someone from the HMRC giving you an absolute guarantee that companies can't find a way around tax rules.
Okay,
it's impossible for me to do that.
Or, in the light
if they do, we'll seek to respond to it.
Okay, in the light of your responses to those the first two questions on price freezing and windfall taxes, which I'll let listeners and viewers conclude what they want to conclude. I made a suggestion a few weeks ago about the benefits of a not-for-profit corporation being introduced into the retail and transmission sectors in an article in the Observer. The arrangement currently exists, particularly in New York and Pennsylvania and other parts of America, also in New Zealand. What's Ofgem's view of cooperative arrangements in retail and transmission?
Well, first of all, there are cooperative arrangements in retail. You had a representative of the cooperative energy here speaking for you in front of you a few weeks ago.
Small.
Small but growing, but it is an option that is available. It's a brand I hope that people trust and are aware of. They've got competitive offerings in the market, and it is an option that consumers have to switch to. So those options do exist already, and there are other not-for-profit players in the market as well. I would.
But in the transmission, there isn't.
Well, in transmission, as I've said, there is a regulated monopoly of for-profit companies, and our job is to make sure that the prices they charge and the service they deliver to consumers is absolutely as it should be.
But my understanding is that the setup in New York and Pennsylvania is really delivering low cost transmission costs to consumers.
I think
I wonder whether actually the chairman's example in Suffolk about transmission, whether a cooperative, if they'd owned the transmission network in Suffolk, I shouldn't think that project would have gone anywhere near as far along the line as it did. And I'm just trying to tease out of you whether you think that there is, in your experience of, it is retail and transmission, because they are joined together, obviously, by definition. If you've only got one wire to each property, one pipe to each property, how on earth can you have competition in that market?
You don't have you have effective regulation of that.
And you've
market.
only got one. You've only got two commodities: electricity and gas.
The policy of putting monopoly utility networks into the private sector to be regulated by independent regulators using incentive-based regulation is a policy that has served this country well.
So you think it's served us well?
I think it has. I think we've, as I've mentioned before, up until a few years ago, we saw year-on-year reductions in network charges. Network charges halved over the first 15 years since privatisation, at the same time as improving outputs, reducing power cuts, increasing the size of the network. There have been increases over the last few years, largely driven by the scale of the investment, and also partly because the low-hanging fruit on cost reduction has been taken. So it's not possible to take half the costs out of these businesses again, having done so once already. So, and if you look at our network charges in relation to the rest of Europe, then we have amongst the lowest network charges of anywhere in Europe, both in gas and in electricity. So I think it has consumed supers very well. And America has a great diversity of regulatory models, some of which have been consciously modelled on the UK approach to network regulation. Others are very different.
But I would agree with you, the privatisation, CGB, but the gains have been had, is my point. We're now at a position where we have a privately owned company and a series of sort of monopoly-like, cartel-like, oligopoly, however you want to describe it, retail energy companies. I wonder whether we've reached a point where the market is no longer delivering for the customer, whether we've reached a tipping point at which we maybe want to say, okay, we've driven out all of the wastage, the waste that was encountered under the CGB over a couple of decades. We're now at this tipping point where we need to perhaps revisit the way in which we structure.
There is, I think, as far as network regulation, there's something true in what you say, that we had, to a certain extent, reached a tipping point where the emphasis needs to be less on delivering further cost reductions and more on delivering investment and delivering smart solutions. And that's one of the reasons, that is the significant reason behind why we introduced the RIO approach, which RIO is revenues equals innovation, incentives and outputs. So the idea is to ensure that companies are properly incentivized not only to reduce costs but also deliver those improved outputs, whether it's connecting wind farms or whether it's delivering smart grid solutions for consumers. And I think as you saw from the fast track announcements that we made for WPD just a couple of days ago, I think that's also proving to be a tremendous success. The companies are stepping up to the plate in terms of engaging with consumers and other stakeholders and putting in place innovative solutions to delivering improved outputs for consumers. So, and actually I'd say the same for retail markets. You know, I can, you know, if you forgive me for harking on again about smart meters, but the requirement for an active demand side, the opportunities afforded by smart metering technology suggests to me that there's potentially a greater role for markets and competition going forward than there is at the past. If we were at a technologically static situation, then I might agree with you, but I don't think we are. We are at the threshold of a smart meter revolution in the industry, that we've only just begun on that path, and I think that would be the wrong time to give up on competition and markets. Thanks.
Yeah.